Hello! It's been a substantial amount of time since the last time I recorded a Jehovah's Witness video. I saw this one from Jared, Heliocentric, and, of course, it's from Memorial, also known as rebranded Passover. For context, in case you are new, I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I was born and raised into a very devoutly Jehovah's Witness family, including extended family, and the majority of the extended family, and about half of my current family, is still very much in the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. So today, we are going to officially enjoy this to an extent, because I bet this is going to be pretty freaking funny. So, join me, won't you? Let us begin.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another thrilling episode of Atheist Mother Dang Church Audit. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist, and tonight I celebrated a memorial service of the death of our Lord with our friends, the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I don't usually get to partake of the Eucharist whenever I go into any of the churches that I go into. And tonight was no exception. However, it was a little bit weird because nobody else took communion while I was there. So in protest of that, I'm not taking communion right now, but I am going to eat crackers and drink wine and think about the sacrifice of Jesus. And that's going to be the next best thing. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I get very animated about this shit, and I know that I'm doing like a YouTube shtick right now, but all this is very real. I hate the Watchtower. I hate this doctrinal system. I hate this theology very, very much. I love these people, and I will continue to praise how sweet and kind these people are. But this system,
Fake kindness.
I hate it. It is evil. It is bad and stupid and dumb, and I hate it, and oh God. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to tone it down a bit, but I know I won't be able to. I'm going to be bitching by the end of this episode, guaranteed. It is April 12th. It is a Saturday, and I got word from a kind stranger on the internet that tonight is the Jehovah's Witness memorial service, which is their equivalent of Easter. You might recall that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate holidays. Easter is included in that. The only kind of quasi-holiday that they have is the one that they are told by Jesus to commemorate. And because the Jehovah's Witnesses are biblical literalists on steroids, they don't see any mandate in the Bible to celebrate Easter. However, they do see an injunction to come and remember the death of Jesus. And I've been to, I don't know, half a dozen Kingdom Hall services and meetings up to this point, and I think that maybe this one has been the most illuminating because it is by far the most hyped. They send out brochures, They knock on your door, they tell you to invite your friends and family. It is a very big deal.
Endless pamphlets. Endless fucking pamphlets. This only confirms that they still do that. That's when going out in service, quote unquote, happens to the door knocking. They don't fucking stop. You know what that means? Not Passover, Passover. And it's not Passover if they say it's not Passover and they give it a different name. The Easter part is interesting because that's the first time I've ever heard anybody equate it to Easter. To me, I only ever have equated it to Passover, not Easter. I guess maybe in like more traditional Christian groups, I guess Easter must be included in Passover. Though to me, it's not. It's a completely separate thing. But like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's just some mix up on my part and something there. I don't know. Or maybe I just explained it to myself and that's actually, what the hell? Oh, that's actually something that, wow, all right. Yeah, that people can confirm to me in the comments. I have no idea. That is the first time I've heard it, though, described as Easter. Easter. So that's interesting. But yeah, no, the fucking, they go ape shit when it comes down to going out in service, or the ministry, or whatever the heck you want to call it. Knocking on the door is not leaving you the fuck alone. Ignoring all of the do not calls that they have marked on their maps, their territory maps, to make sure that they don't do that. And then they'll sometimes even do overlapping because they excuse it because, well, it's not Passover. Passover is about to happen. So we better overlap sometimes. So really encourage, like that'll work, people to go and join us at the not church known as Kingdom Hall, to go and celebrate not Passover. But actually, another thing about it is a good way to put it is that they do kind of have that fervor, and they even treat it kind of even afterward. Most congregations will look at it and treat it exactly like a typical holiday, where once you know the session, the meeting, the memorial meeting happens and it's concluded, everybody and their grandmother's going out together to a Denny's or to a Red Robin. And if you've heard those stereotypes, it's because they could not be more true. Like, if you have Red Robins anywhere in your vicinity of a Kingdom Hall, you have Denny's anywhere within vicinity of your Kingdom Hall, half of them are going to go to Red Robin, the other half are going to go to Denny's, and they're just going to suddenly have a glut of fucking J-dubs just inundating the freaking Denny's, or the local Denny's, or the local Red Robin joints, and that's the way it goes.
Hello. I'm happy to invite you to a special event that will be attended by millions of people. It's the anniversary of Jesus' death. This invitation shows the time and location of the event in our area.
And the fact that it is the most lackluster, banal service of any religious group that I've ever been to speaks volumes. So for this service, I decided to drive way out of my way. I drove way out into the sticks, like an hour north of Raleigh, to go out to this, new Kingdom Hall that I've never been to before. And it was interesting. I texted Jake from Alt Worldly and asked him do you have any tips for going to the memorial service? And he was like, get there early, like an hour early. And I was like, WTF? No, actually, that's crazy. I'm not doing that. I still got there 40 minutes early, and 40 minutes before the service started, there were people outside directing traffic. Like, they had a whole team. So I walk into the Kingdom Hall 40 minutes before the service starts, and it's bumping. There's a lot of people there. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to feel like a little excited at this point. Like, ooh, wow, maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses are gonna spice it up this time. Let's go. Maybe there's actually gonna be some theological depth, or some mystery, or reverence. Ooh. I make my pit stop into the bathroom and take a leak and hear the organ music. And the ugliness of the Kingdom Hall is especially accentuated tonight because it's an evening service. It's already past sunset. So it's night outside, and inside the Kingdom Hall, the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead just makes you feel like you're in an insane asylum. I feel like I'm a frog on a dissection table when I walk into a Kingdom Hall, especially at night. Like, I'm literally staring into my key light right now, and I feel like that's doing less damage to my circadian rhythm than the overhead lighting in a Kingdom Hall. So it's at about that time that the meeting starts. I start with a warm introduction and then jump straight into the song. A single, solitary song. Then after the music, they gave the talk, the holy grail of this whole thing. And to set the stage for this, they've been preparing for months. The memorial of Jesus' death. It's their one holiday. Sound the alarm, ring the bell, get everyone in the neighborhood to come down. Freaking bribe people if you have to. Just get everyone here for this super important service. And the service is literally not a service. It's not it's not a sermon. It's a systematic theology on their stupid doctrine on how nobody should be taking the communion that they're about to present. So rather than emphasize and stress the beauty of the incarnation, they don't believe in the incarnation because they don't believe that Jesus is God. But rather than stress the beauty of Christ's sacrifice and his unending love for us and the grace of God, none of that is there. Instead, it is turn to this verse, we read it. Now keep that in the back of your mind. Now turn to this verse. Fascinating. Now turn to this verse. Doesn't that sound a lot like the previous verse? They treat the Bible as though it is a legal document, and they use the individual passages that they're reading from like points in a syllogism. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 11. premise A. But the gist of this, from what I can gather, is that there are two classes of saved people in the Jehovah's Witness theology. There is the earthly class, and then there is the heavenly class, or the anointed class. The earthly class refers to Jehovah's Witnesses who will be resurrected. They're super good, they're dandy, they're legit, they're great. However, the super duper spiritual elite legit Jehovah's Witnesses are the anointed class. And those are the 144,000 that are talked about in Revelation. And the entire service is literally just to prove this theological point that they want to make, and that is that the only people who should take communion are members of the 144,000, the anointed class. However, that's weird because they are also under the assumption that you ought to be celebrating the communion service every year, and then just the majority of people ought not to be taking communion. This is the dumbest thing, man. It is so stupid. So the entire hubbub around this is just the fact that they are presenting communion, and it looks exactly like normal Protestant communion. They have a little plate with a whole bunch of little bread wafers on it, and they have a glass of wine that they pass around. So the song and dance that's done is you sit in your chair. The ushers will come along and they'll pass the bread and they'll pass the wine. And what do? You take the wine, and you pass it to your right, and you take the bread, and you pass it to their right. And what does the person to your right do? Well, they take the wine, and they pass it to their right. They take the bread, and they pass it to their right. And what does the person to his right do? Well, they take the wine, and they pass it to their right, and they take the bread, and they pass it. And nobody takes communion. Because...
you know what I wish somebody at some point would be brazen enough to like bring a fucking like little packet of like jelly. I just like have the plate, just grab the wafer as you post it, just casually get out your jelly and just start squirting it over the cracker and just eat it. You just casually look at everyone. Not bad, I mean. However, I do feel blessed now. I feel enlightened. Just like start like dropping a little ketamine inside the wine and dump it on a child.
Oh God, because the only people who are allowed to take communion are members of the 144,000. And who are the members of the 144,000? Well, nobody knows, you know?
Exactly.
The people probably know. The super holy spiritual elite who the Holy Spirit has whispered into their heart, they know. Oh gosh. So basically at that congregation, there were two people who took communion. And it's literally just, it's some dude who's like, yeah, no, I think that's me. So the distinction between the 144,000 and the earthly class are that the 144,000 are going to be those who rule and reign with Christ. You know, they're the spiritual elites. All the other Jehovah's Witnesses in the world, you know, they're still like saved and they're going to be living in paradise for forever, but they're not the guys, you know, they're not the governing body of heaven, so to speak. And so if you rewind literally about a year to my very first Jehovah's Witness video, I said back then that the 144,000 doctrine was either revised or totally done away with. And I had a lot of ExJWs chime in and say, no, this has always been the doctrine. And I was right. So to be fair to them as well, this has been the doctrine for years and years and years and years and years. However, it was not always the Watchtower's doctrine. Essentially, here's what happened. When Charles Taze Russell came on the scene in the 1800s, he was going around preaching that there was only going to be 144,000 people saved. And him and all, 6 of his buddies were like, yeah, only 144,000. You said it, preacher. And then, the years went on and they gathered more and more members. And then, oh shit, boss, we have like 2 million members. Fuck, what do we do? Shit, fuck. And so they came up with this theology in order to account for their rapidly growing numbers. They had a 2-tier system implemented so that they didn't say like the majority of our congregants aren't actually going to go to heaven. And then the same thing with this very bizarre communion service. This wasn't always how it was. For decades, They just took communion like other Protestant Christians. But then Judge Rutherford in the 1930s presents this idea at a convention and basically says, hey, there's a two-tier system now. And even though everyone has been taking communion, from now on, the only people who get to take communion are the spiritually elite, the anointed ones. And of course, the Watchtower has greatly suppressed this literature. But the basic gist of it is that the only people who can take communion now are those of the 144,000 class. And how do you know if you're a part of the 144,000? You just have kind of a gut feeling. But it's super weird and counterintuitive because the only people who actually take communion are the people who are audacious and, arrogant enough to think that they are so spiritual that they will be among the 144,000 that Christ chose from every believer throughout history? Yeah, look at me. I'm like the holiest person in my kingdom hall. Yeah, I'm one of the 144,000. And so you take the communion and then everyone in the congregation is like, you dick. And ironically, in what is supposed to be a commemoration of the sacrifice of Jesus has become a spiritual dick measuring contest that is so laughably absurd that I just... It's just so dumb. It's so stupid. And just like the more I study this sect, it feels like all of the insanity of it is just these people doubling down on really stupid, nonsensical interpretations of the Bible. I think the doctrine is stupid, but I think what's worse is just the idea that this is the best thing you guys have to offer. You spent so much time and energy begging people to come to this, and it's laughably stupid. You spent all this time and money and energy inviting all these people to it, and it's so shallow. The entire service is spent doing hermeneutic gymnastics rather than focusing on Jesus. How did you get here? And I always have to remind people, I'm an atheist. If these people were heretics, I wouldn't even care. It's not that they deny the Trinity. It's not that they have a weird conception of who Jesus is. It's that nothing about this is good or deep or rich or theologically meaningful. It's as deep as a mud puddle and rich as tree bark. They are so spiritually deprived that this sermon, which honestly sounds more like a bar exam than an actual edifying homily, is somehow emotionally and spiritually edifying to them. And it's crazy to me. I know in actuality, behind closed doors, they're reprimanded if they don't pay attention. But ultimately, it's like they're not able to have fun or enjoyment or satisfaction outside the church. And then inside the church, this is all they get. And it is spiritual slop. It is a spiritual slap in the face. The one celebration that you get every year. You don't get a birthday, you don't get Christmas, you don't get Easter. What you get is a communion plate that is passed around and you don't get to take any. You get a reminder of the blood and flesh of Christ, the sacrifice of Jesus, and you don't get any.
And don't forget, the other most important thing they constantly harp about, not just leading up into, but especially during Memorial, is how it was not a cross. It wasn't a crucifix. He was nailed to a stake. There wasn't a cross beam. It was just one single vertical beam. There was no horizontal anything going on. Stop that. Stop it right now. That's wrong. That's satanic. No, it was exclusively a single vertical beam. There was no horizontal axis. Stop it. Stop it. You're poisoning my spirituality.
The only people who do are the pretentious pricks in your congregation who think they actually deserve it. How did you guys survive this?
Because I don't give a shit.
To my ExJW friends, how did you make it out of this shit alive?
Because I didn't give a fuck. Genuinely. I just didn't.